So, I've been collecting Necrons since 3rd edition, and today it's time to showcase my heavy support units. It's coming right up.
Necrons!
Nick speaking, and welcome to this video, the 5th video in a series I'm doing showcasing my entire Necron army, and in this one we're looking at heavy support. When I first started playing in 3rd edition there were 3 heavy support choices. We had the Monolith, which of course is now a Lord of War, and we had the Canoptic Spiders, or Tomb Spiders as they were called back then. Of course, Tomb Spiders are now elites. So the last and only remaining heavy support unit in this codex is the Heavy Destroyers, of course now known as the Locust Heavy Destroyers. Now of course in 9th edition, Heavy Destroyers are more prominent. We're generally taking at least 2 units. I've got another unit of Heavy Destroyers which I'm going to show you later. It's a converted unit. I'm currently building and painting 3 of the newer Locust Heavy Destroyers, so they obviously need to be added to this table once they're done. But that will give me 3 units of Heavy Destroyers, and each unit will look a little bit different on the table. That will help me to distinguish which unit is which. As I said, we'll come back to the Heavy Destroyer later in the video. But for now, that was the 3rd edition heavy support choices. Now in the next codex at the end of 5th edition, beginning of 6th edition, we had 3 more units added to the heavy support slot. The first one was the new Doom Scythe. Of course now that is a flyer. We then had the Doomsday Ark and the Annihilation Barge. First though, let's have a look at the Doomsday Ark. This model is actually a dual kit, so you can make the Doomsday Ark and the Ghost Ark, and I've fully magnetised mine to be both of these units. I'll put a link to that magnetising tutorial in the description below. I've even magnetised the guns on the side, so when you spin this around the other way, the guns are the correct way. It's a pretty cool miniature. I had to adapt the base. I've got a video on this because this base tends to break. However, with my new system, I don't have any issues with the base. It was at this time that they introduced drivers to our vehicles. Of course, before, the Necrons only had one vehicle, and that was the Monolith. So it was a surprise to see more vehicles come out in this edition, but also to see drivers actually driving the vehicles, because obviously the Monolith, well, there's no visible driver. Some people like it, some people don't. What do you think about drivers for our Necron vehicles? Let me know in the comments box below. I currently own 2 of these miniatures. As I said, they're both magnetised. I do have 2 more in my pile of shame ready to build and paint. So yeah, I've got more to add to this army, and I will get around to it at some point. So next is the Annihilation Barge, another dual kit. You can make this into the Command Barge or the Annihilation Barge. And of course, once again, I've fully magnetised mine. So these guns, and that's not a good demonstration. I fully magnetised mine, so I can take the guns out, and I can take this section out, and then I can obviously put the command deck in there and make it into a Command Barge. It's a really cool miniature. Again, we've got drivers for this vehicle. It's a very cool miniature, and again you've got the driver there at the front. Now this miniature and some of the other new miniatures in this edition introduced the Tesla weapon to the army. Previously it was all Gauss, and of course Gauss was represented by plastic green rods. So when it came to painting my Tesla guns, I tried to emulate that green rod so that it matched my army as much as I could. So I just painted it like a block green, as you can see there. I think it works, but of course Games Workshop over time have discontinued the green rods in the army for obvious reasons. Personally, I really liked them, and I was quite sad to see them go, but I do understand why they did it. Now, of course, the Doomsday Ark does actually have the Gauss flayers on here, which were the same weapons, of course, the warriors were holding, but no green rods. So again, I came up with this paint scheme to paint them to look like green rods as much as I could. I've currently got 2 magnetised Annihilation Barges, and again, I've got another 2 in my pile of shame ready to do. The next codex saw the Transcendent Catan added to heavy support. Of course now that's been moved to elites. The 7th edition codex didn't bring any change to the heavy support slots. However, of course, 9th edition did. It was at this stage that the Monolith, the Transcendent Catan and the Doomstalker came out of the heavy support choice, and then from the fast attack choice introduced into the heavy support choice were the Necron destroyers, and with a name change to Locust destroyers. So the destroyers got a name change to Locust destroyers. However, we didn't get any new models. We're still using these miniatures, which is slightly odd because the heavy destroyer got a new miniature when it became the Locust heavy destroyers, but not these. And if you consider that the heavy destroyer is basically the same model as the normal destroyer, it just has a gun upgrade, so it was really odd. The Locust heavy destroyer, which I've got here, I haven't painted it yet, as you can see. You would have thought they would have just done another gun option, allowing you to have it as a normal destroyer. I'm not quite sure why they didn't do that. Maybe in the next release. However, I'm not too bothered because personally I like these old destroyers. I know a lot of people don't. It's probably because I grew up with them. You know, they were the destroyer of choice back in 3rd edition, and I think they still look really cool. And like I said, I'm a fan of green rods anyway, so it doesn't bother me that they have green rods. I have 15 of these plastic miniatures, 9 which I built and painted myself, and then another unit of 6 which were given to me by a very kind subscriber on the channel. He bought them from eBay for me, and my original idea was to repaint them to match the rest of my army. However, I haven't brought myself to do it because the paint scheme is really cool. Not only that, when you see these miniatures amongst my army, they don't stand out like a sore thumb. They actually match the army pretty well. Now, not only is there a unit of 6, but we've also got a heavy destroyer as well. You are able to upgrade one of the Locust destroyers to a Locust heavy destroyer in the unit, so that was pretty useful to have one of those in that batch of miniatures. However, I didn't stop there because I went back in time to before I started playing Necrons, and I bought for myself some Necron Raiders. Those were basically the old school Necron destroyers back in the day of Rogue Trader. These miniatures are made of metal. I have magnetised mine to the base, and I think they look really cool. I actually use this unit as tomb blades occasionally. I've got 8 of them altogether, and I got so inspired by this miniature because I thought it looked so cool that I decided to make some heavy destroyers out of these. So yeah, in came my heavy destroyer conversion from the Necron Raider. I've got a video on the conversion that I did for these guys, but as you can see, I basically put a new weapon on there. This is an adapted weapon from the Annihilation Barge. I've got this green rod in there from a Monolith, and the tubing at the top and bottom of the rod is just made from plastic tubes. I really like this conversion, and of course I've got 3 of them, so 1 unit of Locust heavy destroyers, and if I'm playing these guys as just normal destroyers, then of course I can use one of these as a heavy upgrade. And that rounds out my units of destroyers. However, we had 1 more unit added in this slot, a brand new unit, very different than anything else that we've seen before. 9th edition did that, the Doomstalker. Arguably one of the better value for money kits. If you look at the cost for the size of the miniature, it's not too bad. It is a plastic miniature and it's a push fit miniature, so it's designed just to go together without any glue. However, of course I would recommend you glue them. But very, very different. 4 legs, that big gun on the top. Of course, it's a canoptic unit. I paint most of my canoptic units with white faces. I have magnetised the top section for storage. I've got 3 of these, which I converted because in my mind's eye and from the artwork, these guys actually hover in the air. So that's what I did. I raised 2 of the legs on this one, and of course, all of the legs on this one, I've got them literally floating in the air. Now, at the moment, these are units of 1, So 3 is the maximum that you can take. However, I actually have 4 of these because I've got a 3D printed one. I have a video all about this 3D printed miniature which I will link you up to in the description below. As you can see, it's a little taller, not too much taller, but a little taller, and just a little chunkier. The gun is actually slightly bigger. It has 3 legs rather than 4, just to make it different from the Games Workshop miniature. I'm hoping that one day in the future we'll be able to take units of Doomstalkers, maybe a unit of 2 or 3. I think that would be a good move from Games Workshop, but we'll see what happens. And that rounds up all of my heavy support choices for the army. If you enjoyed this video, then why not check out my other showcase videos in that playlist just there.